Hello and welcome everyone to ElectionSpeakers.com, the place for unique critique of the important speakers of this 2012 presidential campaign. My name is Dr. Dennis Becker, and I'll be your host for these special podcasts. They're designed to give voters a valuable piece of information that's needed to make a confident decision on November the 6th. We'll be watching and listening to the candidates and others who are trying to win your vote. Their talking techniques and their tactics are our exclusive topic for these unique critiques. Joining me today, as is always for so many years, is my colleague and partner, Laurie Schloff. She's a senior coaching partner at the Speech Improvement Company. Welcome, Laurie.
Thanks so much, Dennis.
Joining Laurie and I today is with us Robin Maxfield, and Robin is a senior coach at the Speech Improvement Company and our storytelling coach. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Dennis.
Now, we're going to be talking about today a rather unique program. We're going to be talking about the scorecard. So if those of you who are listening have not yet downloaded a scorecard for these debates, please do so. Go to ElectionSpeakers.com and click on the scorecard. Get yourself a copy of the scorecard that we're using, because you know from listening to us in the past that we're very careful about grading these speakers in 10 specific areas. Now remember, we're also grading on process, not on content. Our job is not to judge the content. We're listening to the way in which the content is presented. So this is all coaching and critiquing that has to do with the way the speakers are presenting their ideas. And we try to be as objective as possible, not Republican, not Democrat. And you catch us every now and then, and that's okay. We enjoy hearing back from you. It's fine. Keep us honest. We're trying very hard to be objective and to be educational. That's why this whole series, ElectionSpeakers.com, exists. We want to be educational. We want you, as a voter, to feel confident when you go in there to vote. You know that you're voting because you understand the seriousness of each issue. You understand the way it's presented. You understand where the speakers stand on these issues. They interpret them for you. They put them in language that you can understand. That's what we're going to talk about today. How do they do that? So I'm going to ask Laurie Schloff to talk a little bit about the scorecard itself. Laurie, remember, folks, if you don't have one, ElectionSpeakers.com, you can download it for yourself, and Laurie's going to tell you about the scorecard itself. Laurie.
The scorecard, Dennis and Robin, has, as you know, 10 different dimensions. These are dimensions our team thought would be very, very important to look at. Now, remember, again, to reiterate what Dennis says, we're not looking at politics. We're looking at how Romney and how Obama do at the podium during the debates. And also, of course, there's a vice presidential debate coming up, too. What I'd like to do is name what each of the different areas are, and then have my colleagues, Robin and Dennis, sort of jump in and add some color. So the first is eye contact. Everyone's heard that term, where the debaters are looking, where they're engaged. Do they look at everybody? Dennis, do you want to talk a little bit about what might make good eye contact?
Well, remember that the eyes are probably, maybe except for the smile, eyes are a very, very expressive part of the face, and what you do with them, it makes a difference in the way people here understand you. So when we talk about these debates, it's kind of awkward to talk about that because there's really no place to look except into the camera. So what are you looking for when you're judging? You're looking for, does the speaker look at the person who's asking the question? Does he or she look at the opposition, the candidate? Did they look directly at into the camera at you? And when we were critiquing the speakers at the Republican and Democratic conventions, we talked about how even though they had those presidential paddles, those teleprompters on the left and the right, the really effective speakers knew precisely when to make eye contact right down the middle to the listeners back at home. So that's what we're looking for.
I agree.
And how about looking at the person who's speaking?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember that Elizabeth Warren, the thing that came up with her is her glasses had slid down her nose and cut her pupils in half, which in the beginning of her speech really, I think, affected her ability to communicate with listeners.
Okay, everyone. My favorite dimension that we're going to score, and all of us are going to score,
number 2,
is number 2, vocal variety, how interesting somebody is. And I always joke with my clients, there's a barometer, how boring you are. I made that term up. So, of course, the goal is to not be boring.
Did you say a barometer?
A barometer. I made that term up.
I never heard that. That's pretty good.
So, I mean, you could almost say sometimes the person who's the most interesting wins, the most interesting to listen to. So
point.
what creates vocal variety for you, Robin? What makes somebody interesting to listen to?
So the vocal variety, sometimes it's just the sound. It's not only the changes in their voice, where they're maybe getting louder and softer, higher and lower, but it's also the tone of their voice. So does it have a nice calming effect? That's what I like to hear.
Mm-hmm. Almost like presidential. Yes.
Yes,
Dennis.
I noticed that when we were doing the conventions, those who were attempting to make a point that was either serious or light, they would change the vocal variety. They change the sound of it. It might be very intense. You need to, like that, or it could be laid back. Those of us who are not having a good time. So the change in the sound, the overall use of the voice is a very powerful tool.
Right.
And
And does
the
it
word
go
variety.
And does it go along with the message as well, right?
Oh, it better.
So
It better, because you can say something, which if you look at grammatically or on a piece of paper, which means one thing, but if you say it in a slightly different way, meaning is missed.
And that hurts credibility.
Absolutely.
okay, so we have number 1, eye contact. Number 2, vocal variety. Number 3 is something we're famous for here at the Speech Improvement Company, articulation and pronunciation. I remember there was one candidate who couldn't say the word president. He left out a syllable. Oh,
Yeah.
It really got to me as a speech coach. First, Dennis, you're so good with definitions. Could you differentiate articulation from pronunciation?
They are different, and a lot of folks use them the same and interchangeably. They are very different. From a technical standpoint, here you go. Articulation is the ability to produce individual sounds. Now, we have a little more than 40 sounds in American English, so the ability to make that b, s, l, j, whatever, to make those sounds, that's the process of articulation. Pronunciation is when you take those particular sounds and put them together to make a word that other people understand. So there's a big difference. One is the specific sound within the word. Pronunciation is the putting the sounds together to make the word that people understand. So when, for instance, when Vice President Biden was talking about the automobile industry, at one point he wanted to say the terms automobile industry. Well, individually he had the sounds right, but he blended it together and it came out to be automobile industry. And he smushed. What was that? Was it articulation or pronunciation? Well, it was a little of both, but it was mostly a pronunciation issue. So there's a difference there.
Right, and we call that smushing.
That's a
too much
technical
assimilation, right? Right.
Well, and the pronunciation is an effective tool, I noticed, when they're trying to bond with certain delegations out there.
Yes,
So
yes.
throwing out that word, like here in Boston,
Yeah.
our accents, park the cat.
Right.
Or in Michigan, is everybody happy?
Right, and President Obama sometimes seems to leave off the ing, come and go and doing when he wants to be folksy.
So technically we'd say that's bad pronunciation, but the effect of that is perfect. That's where he wants it. I'm fixing, folks. Let me tell you
tool.
something. I mean, this articulation and pronunciation can be purposely very sloppy and be very effective.
Dimension number 4, I want Robin to comment on. It's facial expression, and I always say to my clients, you're being watched from the neck up. But, especially if you're being seen on a TV screen. So talk about the importance of facial expression, Robin.
Facial expressions are so key, I think, to not only communication, but their authenticity. And it's a nuance, right? So it's very subtle. I think in order for somebody to have the self-awareness about how their facial expressions affect their communication, they really need to video themselves and not even a mirror. They need to video themselves because that gives you the objectivity to analyze your messaging. And the facial expressions, I'm not sure that anyone that I can think of, Laurie, maybe you can, that really use the full range of facial expression to underscore their messaging. I think that's an area where all the speakers could improve. I think it's a little risky for them maybe because, raising an eyebrow the wrong way or opening your eyes too much, showing the whites around your pupil may it could destroy your entire meaning. But it is an area, I think, where it's underutilized, especially in politics.
It can be very, very powerful and very bonding. Dennis, I remember when I first met you many years ago, you said that My smile should last a little bit longer, and that really stuck with me. So what are some of, like, how do you analyze facial expressions? Because I know the length of how long something lasts, the range, which Robin mentioned.
Yes, both
How
of those
else?
things are very important. And one of the main things we look for in politicians is what we call the no nod, N-O, not K-N-O-W, N-O. So, and you'll see this in politicians all the time. Well, watch for it next time. Let's see. They are saying something which is positive, saying something positive, but they are showing with their facial expression or a head gesture, the answer is no. So they might be saying, we like that part of this program. This part of the platform is something we really favor. You hear that? Sounds good. But if you look at the guy, he's shaking his head from left to right to left to right. This is called the no nod. It's a really mixed message, and the facial expression says one thing, but the voice and the words say something different. It's a mixed message, and that's a bad thing.
It's a bad thing, and I think some people actually say that reveals.
Yeah, what's you really thinking?
Which one do you really
Which
listen to?
one? Exactly right.
Body language.
Now,
Yep.
dimension number 5 gets a lot of attention. What we do with our hands. And I always say, we don't get up in the morning and say, what should I do with these guys? But if we're in a debate, what we do with our hands
Yeah.
really matters.
Yep.
So why don't we share a little bit about what makes somebody effective in using their hands? And should they use their hands at all? Robin?
Well, in my opinion, they should. It's another tool that you can use to make your message more effective. It needs to be thoughtful and intentional. And I know that one of Dennis's pet peeves is what do you call it, bandstanding or being a conductor?
Yeah.
And
Bad leading.
band leading. And I think that's something we saw a lot of, right?
Let's talk about that. Band leading gets its name from a band leader. What happens when the band leader gestures and uses his up and down, and hands left and right? The band responds. Okay. When the band leader stops, the band stops, basically. So when we apply this to speakers, you'll notice that there are some speakers who, while they're talking, their hands are going all over the place. As soon as they stop talking, the hands stop. Nothing happens. This is called band leading. The basic principle of gestures, if we can try to simplify this for folks, it's got 2 parts. Number 1, be yourself. Gesture. If you like the gesture, just gesture. Go ahead. Now, let's apply that to the debate where we're only seeing about half of your body and there's a frame around your head and your shoulders. Can you just do whatever you want? Okay, the second part and the second principle that we go by, first one being be yourself. Do what's natural. The second one being don't do anything that attracts attention to itself. So that can be a lot of things. And when you're, as Laurie was saying before, when you're on camera, it's very important to know what kind of a shot you have. How far can you put your hands out left and right, up and down? We saw speakers at both conventions jumping in and out of the frame with their hands and their arms. And then there are others, and we gave this criticism to Mr. Romney, if you remember, when we talked about his acceptance speech. He looked as though his elbows were attached to his waist and his gestures were... So there are a lot of things about gestures that we can look at. But be yourself, but don't do anything that attracts attention to itself.
I also look for gestures that are strong, often an open palm, and this goes without saying, visible. Some people are gesturing, but if it's below, the lectern they're standing at, no one's going to see them, or they'll wonder what you're doing.
And Laura, you often talk about taking up space, especially for women, and I think that would have been some good coaching for Elizabeth Warren, especially who's very slight in frame. Taking up more space, which could mean going out. Dennis says be yourself, but you might have to go outside your comfort zone to really be effective.
Yeah, that's a good point. Be yourself doesn't mean that you should, if you're comfortable just sort of standing there like a tree trunk. I mean, that doesn't mean that's right either.
Right.
So you do have to learn some things that work in those different mediums like television and so forth. Good point.
Great, everybody. Each of these dimensions is going to be worth 10 points. We have 10 dimensions. I've already shared, and the group has shared 5 of those. So the maximum score that any debater can get is 100.
10 in
that
each
would
category,
be a perfect score.
Right.
All right, so let's go on to dimension number 6, which has 3 words: wording, organization, and choice of language. So again, Dennis, as our definition expert, do you want to differentiate some of these? For example, language versus wording.
Yeah. Language, let's take the smallest part of all of that is the word language. Language literally means words, vocabulary choice. We were alluding to it before when people say, Mr. Biden would say, now, folks, the choice of the word folks, that's language. He chose folks. He didn't say, sometimes you hear people say, ladies and gentlemen, not folks, or
My
citizens.
peeps.
My peeps. Yeah, this is
That'd be
sure.
funny.
This is a choice of language. It's the specific word choice, okay? Wording is how you put those words together, the different language pieces that you put together. I'm fixin' to. Well, that's wording, okay?
It's a phrase.
It becomes a phrase. So wording is how you put the language together. Organization is when you ultimately take the language and the wording, and put it into a framework that becomes easy or difficult or whatever for folks to follow. So there's a difference amongst these three things.
Right, so we will be asking you to score whether or not you understood the answer in terms of the thought pattern. Was it clear? Bill Clinton, for example, got rave reviews for using what, Dennis, you call shirt sleeve English.
Yeah.
Everyone understood. In fact, I'm writing an article now called You Can Be Your Own Clinton, because Obama retweeted something that was tweeted a million times, which called him the secretary, called Clinton the secretary of explaining things.
Yeah, that's great.
So, Obama
Which
joked
he
that
did
he'd
a-
create a new position.
He did a great job. And the other thing, while we're on this particular point, Laurie, that I want our listeners and our voters to recognize is when, and this is really important in the debate, when the candidate is asked a question, do they answer that question? Now, it's an old political tool, and from coaching standpoint, I mean, all of us, those of us who are coaches, we know that sometimes you coach a person how not to answer the question that was asked. Okay, this is different. These debates, voters, you citizens, my friends, we need to be able to get a straight answer from any politician. So listen carefully. When the question is asked, listen for language, wording, how the question is organized by the interviewer, and then listen, did that candidate answer that question? Or like so many, they sort of said, yes, I do. But the real important thing is, and then off they go.
Right,
So we've got to be really careful about how they answer these questions.
But philosophically, is it that bad, though?
To do what?
To talk about something that you do know about and evade the... Are we going to agree that it's bad to evade? Just wondering.
I think I would agree with that. I would agree with
bad
that.
to
yeah.
evade.
Yeah,
If
I think
somebody
so.
asks you a question.
At this level,
Yeah.
presidential level, I think it's so critical because the power that the position holds and the person in that position, I think we really do need to understand where he or she stands on a specific issue so that we know what we're getting into. And I think evasion would be a bad thing at this point.
Interesting. I want to go on to the next dimension and call on Robin, who is really expert at helping people with comfortable and confident delivery. The next dimension, which is number 7, we're calling body language. So what are the things that we're looking for, Robin, in terms of comfort and confidence with body language?
Well, the most basic thing the first thing that I see is posture. And certainly when it comes to being a leader, there's a certain posture we imagine that someone would have. And then the next thing is more abstract, is do they look comfortable in their own skin?
Right. And how about this, is it Romney's fault? A lot of people have, since he entered politics, have called him stiff looking.
Yes.
And so what does it mean to be comfortable versus stiff? This is something we'll really pay attention to when both Obama and Romney are on the stage together. Any other comments about this very
I
important
remember when
dimension?
this came up very strongly when Al Gore was running. And he was always considered to be stiff. And he hated that term. He hated to be called stiff. And so he had his team, how can we loosen him up? It was always button-down shirt and so with a very a formal presentation. So how can we loosen him up? So they took him out of the suit, put him in a pair of slacks, a button-down shirt. But the button-down shirt was stuffed in perfectly in his slacks. The cuffs were all buttoned. It was neatly pressed. I mean, he was still so formal.
help himself,
He didn't look comfortable in that. So part of what Robin is saying, do they look comfortable in their own skin? Do they seem to feel comfortable the way they present themselves? So we're looking at, for body language, we're looking at, does that speaker, or the candidate, project confidence, comfort, and most of all, competence? That's an important thing. How do you project competence through body language? That's what we're looking for.
Right. I'll be looking at how they might handle either hostility or a challenge, either from the moderator or from their opposition. Can they be? Most people want their president to be somewhat cool under pressure.
Yeah. You take, for example, if any those of you who happen to see former governor of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm, when she did her presentation at the convention, she had them on their seats, the top of the stairs, yelling and screaming and shouting. And if you look at the video, you'll find it on YouTube. Her arms are all up. She's shouting and she's punching the air and she's all over the place. So certainly her body language seemed anything but presidential. But wait a minute. It worked. She was up there. However, she was not running for president. So as Laurie, I think as you point out very correctly, is that the level of whatever it is you're representing needs to match with the body language that you're projecting.
Let's go on to numbers 8 and 9 on our scorecard. So number 8 is the speed of speech, which we call rate. And we want to help our listeners to differentiate the speed of speech, the rate, from something that we're going to call pace, which also involves speed. So Dennis, let's first of all, what are the two different things we're going to be looking at?
All right, the words are similar. Of course, everybody thinks they're the same. They are very, very different from a speech coaching and critiquing perspective. They're very different. Rate is the speed at which you put words together, one right after the other. So when I'm talking to you like this, the rate of my speed has changed a little bit. If I'm talking to you like this is a faster rate of speed. The words are coming out a little bit more fast. Okay, that's rate. Okay, the word at which you put words together, the speed at which you put words together. Pace is the speed at which you put thoughts together. Very different. So when you're talking about a thing and you want to say blah 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 about the thing, and then you have a second thing that you want to talk about, the space between when you stop talking about the first one and start talking about the second one, that space of time, which is literally pause, you hear that? Pause of silence. That's what we call pace. And what we've seen in so many of these speeches so far, what we'll be listening for in the debates, of course, is how does a speaker control both rate and pace to make the points and to clarify what they're talking about.
When somebody covers, let's say, too many topics, so it gets confusing, because you talked about pace as being a lot of ideas. Would that also be an example of fast pace?
Yeah, usually that's a problem with fast pace. There's a lot to say. And, in debates, to be fair, it's really hard in the debate because you get timed and, there's pretty intricate topics and so forth. How much can you talk about in the 60 seconds or the 30 seconds that they give you? So you have to be a good speaker. We're going to see two really good speakers, in my view, between Romney and Obama. It was between Obama and McCain last year, not so much. But this year, we got two really good speakers and debaters. So their problem is going to be how much of the information that I know, because I'm so smart, how much of it can I get into 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and still I could get it in, but how much can I make it be understood, help it be understood by controlling the pace of it? So it's a big decision.
Right. And Robin, related to speed of speech or rate, sometimes we coach people to sort of speed up because people can absorb the material. But is there ever a time, though, where we're going to be looking for a debater to go a bit slower?
Yeah, I think when the subject matter becomes more complex, and there's plenty of that they're going to be discussing.
Or how about all the numbers that might come up related to the economy?
People have struggled a lot.
And I've often appreciated speakers who use rate and pace for emphasis. So as you're going along, instead of saying, all of this applies to each and every one of us. All of this applies to each and every one of us. If you change that, all of this applies to each and every one of us. So I use rate and pace there for purposes of emphasis. That's what we're looking for.
Much more effective.
Right. What I liked about your example, Dennis, is that it was deliberate. But if someone doesn't do it deliberately, it might simply sound choppy.
It could, and it may sound insincere. I mean, there's all sorts of implications and inferences that can be drawn from the way, just the rate and the pace at which it's said.
Well, and remember, the debates, you have to think on your feet.
Yeah.
Right? They do a lot of preparation. They know what the subjects are going to come up. They know what they're going to be asked, but they also try to trick and surprise, which is really where the rubber meets the road. And that's not something that you can learn on the fly. And so you can't be caught up in your head thinking about how. You already have to have the you already have to have embodied effective speaking tools like rate and pace and emphasis and gestures and facial expressions. You already have to have somewhat of an understanding of that, a practice of that, so that you can focus on organizing your thoughts. As you say, Laurie, mind over mouth.
Thank you, mind over mouth. Absolutely.
That's right.
You know something, number 10, which is connection with the listeners and theme, maybe that's in a way the most important of all in terms of the purpose of the debates, because after all, the purpose of the debates is to win over the undecided voters.
Absolutely.
How is connection one of these sort of, vague things, or can we actually look at a situation, a debate, and tell whether there was a good connection? What are some of the things we look for?
First, let's throw this to Robin Laurie, because Robin is our storytelling coach, and not only is she an award-winning storyteller, but she coaches storytelling. So these guys, whatever they are, whatever candidate, they're telling their story. Now, yes, there's a lot of technical stuff involved in it and so forth, but what do you tell someone who's trying to tell a story? What do you tell them is most effective to help them make the connection, to help the audience make the connection with what the story is and the storyteller is doing? How do you coach that?
They have to know why they're telling the story. What's the relevance of the story? Then the story should tap into some universal human emotion. The other effectiveness of the story is telling the story in real time in order for the listener's brain waves to connect with the teller's brain waves and the story to come alive around them. It needs to be told in the present tense.
Oh.
It's interesting in terms of connection, this whole idea of appealing to your listeners emotionally, that would seem to be very, very important. Particularly, I'm going to say, for Romney, since apparently over the months his likability hasn't been as high. So that I know that's going to be something that you're going to help us look for, Robin.
Well, remember the story about the rose and his mother?
Oh,
everybody was jumping up and down about that.
That was great.
And coming from
That
a
was
guy
great.
like him, it helped him to connect with people. That was memorable.
It really
He
worked.
could use more of that.
Yeah.
Along with connection with the listeners is the word theme. So how does somebody, especially in a debate, make the theme memorable, make it clear, make it a takeaway that I might remember the next day and be able to talk to somebody about it at the proverbial water cooler?
Well, let's talk about what a theme is. Theme, from a coaching perspective, theme is that one thing which, if your listeners forget everything else, they will go away remembering the next day at the water cooler. And that means that you as the speaker have got to be able to condense that, to communicate that in a crisp, clear, consistent way. Now, that's an important thing. So let's assume that they create a theme. When we work with coaching, we coach corporate executives all the time, and even when we coach politicians, we want them to get that theme into a single sentence. One sentence. And there's a whole lot of thinking that goes into that, but can you condense it to one sentence? What's the essence of it? 8 to 10 words. Boom, with a period at the end. If they can do that, you can get that theme together. That theme should be repeated maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times, depending on the length of the presentation, over and over, so that the next day at that water cooler, bang, that's what comes.
It's memorable.
Exactly.
Speaking of memorable, one of the things we've been putting in our signatures is On to Victory with ElectionSpeakers.com, which is the name of our website. And I'm going to turn this back to you, Dennis, as we wrap up.
Look, we have said a lot to you guys today, and there's probably a lot more to say, but we wanted to give you this introduction and this overview of how to use the scorecard that you have in front of you, hopefully, and if you don't have it yet, download it from ElectionSpeakers.com, and you can keep in touch with us on Twitter at SpeechImprove. Let me get that to you. Our Twitter address is at SpeechImprove. Not improvement, it's improve. So let's get that down right. And of course, tap into us at Facebook anytime you like. And ElectionSpeakers.com is where we are all the time, and you'll get a lot of information about not only this particular card, this judge's scorecard, but other things that we've been talking about. And Robin and Laurie, and we have other guests, and we'll have many other guests with us during the debates themselves, professors and Republicans and Democrats. It's going to be a spicier kind of a show when we get to that point. So we are so pleased to have you with us. And remember, all of this is about helping helping you become a much more informed, much better, smarter, more confident, competent voter. That's why we're here. And right now, that's all we have the time for on this edition of ElectionSpeakers.com. But we'll be back with more of this most unique critique of the most important speakers in this 2012 presidential campaign. In the meantime, thanks for Laurie today. Laurie Schloff, our senior coaching partner from the Speech Improvement Company, and Robin Maxfield, our senior coach and storytelling coach from the Speech Improvement Company. Thank you both. And until next time, I'm Dr. Dennis Becker saying thanks for listening and bye for now.